The forests have always been a place of solace for me, a place to escape the noise of the world. Growing up, the wilderness was my refuge, my sanctuary. I could always hear my grandfather's voice in the back of my mind, urging me to respect the woods, respect the creatures, and above all, respect the stories passed down through generations. My grandfather often warned me about the skinwalkers, beings that roamed the dark places of the world, capable of taking the shape of animals or even humans. I always dismissed these tales as simple folklore, stories told to scare children into staying close to home. But that was before I ventured into the woods that day. I had been hunting alone, like I often did, searching for the perfect shot, the perfect moment. The towering pines stretched high above me, their branches whispering secrets in the wind. The ground was soft beneath my boots, the forest floor alive with the smell of earth and pine needles. It felt like any other day in the woods, the kind of day that made me feel invincible. I thought I knew this forest better than anyone, having spent countless hours trekking through its depths, tracking animals, studying the terrain. The woods had always been a second home to me, a place where I felt connected to something greater than myself. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a knife. The voice was unmistakable. It was my grandfather's voice. But as I ventured deeper, something felt off. The light seemed wrong, muted. The sky above was heavy with clouds, thick and oppressive, as though the heavens themselves were holding their breath. The air had a chill to it that didn't belong at this time of year, and the usual hum of nature, birds, insects, the wind had gone silent. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for something, watching me. I paused, my hand on the barrel of my rifle, scanning the trees around me. There was no sound, no movement, just an unnerving stillness that made my pulse quicken. It was then that I first heard it. A voice, soft and familiar, whispering my name. "Come closer." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. My grandfather had passed away years ago, yet here it was, his voice echoing through the trees. A sickening knot twisted in my stomach as the voice came again, softer this time, but more insistent. "I'm here, come to me. Come closer, I need you." My instincts screamed at me to run, to turn around and get out of there, but I couldn't move. The voice seemed to pull me in like a magnetic force. My feet were rooted to the spot, and I was powerless to resist the urge to follow it. I stepped forward, my rifle gripped tightly in my hands, my breath coming in shallow gasps. As I pushed through the underbrush, the trees began to close in around me, their branches seeming to stretch out like skeletal hands. The forest felt alive, watching me, waiting for something to happen. The silence was suffocating, pressing down on me from all sides. My grandfather's voice came again, now louder, now more frantic. I should have turned around. I should have listened to that small voice in my head that warned me to stop. But I didn't. I was too deep now, too far into the forest to turn back. The ground beneath my feet grew more uneven, the trees thicker, their trunks twisted and gnarled like ancient spirits. A dark sense of dread settled over me like a cloak, but I kept moving forward. And then I saw it. The clearing ahead was bathed in an eerie, unnatural light. The air was thick with a heavy fog that clung to the ground, swirling in the cold wind. In the center of the clearing was a figure, a creature I couldn't quite comprehend. At first I thought it was a deer, but as it stepped into the light I realized it was far from ordinary. The creature was hunched over, its legs jerking and twitching in unnatural, erratic movements. Its body was covered in matted fur, but its face, it wasn't the face of a deer. No, it was something else entirely. It was human, or at least it looked like a human face. Its eyes were wide and terrified, locked onto mine as if it recognized me. But they were not the eyes of an animal. They were eyes that had seen too much, eyes that had been corrupted by something far darker than nature itself. The creature's mouth opened in a grotesque imitation of a scream, but no sound came out. Instead, it made a choked, wheezing noise, as though it was trying to communicate but couldn't. its body contorted unnaturally, its back arching as it struggled to maintain its form. It was like watching a man fight to break free of an animal's skin. A part of me wanted to look away, but another part of me was transfixed, unable to tear my gaze from the thing before me. And then, in a movement so fast I could barely track it, the creature twisted and flung itself toward me, its limbs snapping into place like the cracks of a whip. I staggered back, raising my rifle, but the creature didn't attack. It stopped just short of me, its head jerking unnervingly to one side as it studied me with those human eyes. The air grew colder, the fog thicker, and the forest around me seemed to grow darker. The creature, no, the thing, wasn't just an animal. It was something far worse. It was a skinwalker. The realization hit me like a hammer. I remembered my grandfather's warnings, the stories he had told me in hushed tones by the fire, the way he had always insisted that I never stray too far into the woods, never venture out after dark. Skinwalkers, he had said, were witches who could transform into any animal they wished. They could wear the skin of the creatures they took, walk in their shapes, and manipulate their voices to lure people into their traps. They were dangerous creatures of darkness, born from curses and dark rituals. I wanted to run. I wanted to turn and flee from this abomination, but I couldn't. The thing's gaze held me in place, locking me there like a predator with its prey. It moved again, slowly this time, its body still twisted and unnatural as it took a step toward me. Its mouth opened once more, and this time a voice emerged, a voice I recognized. "Come closer, I need you." It was my grandfather's voice again, but this time it was twisted, corrupted, as though it had been stretched and distorted by some unnatural force. The sound sent chills down my spine, and I realized then that whatever was before me, it wasn't my grandfather. It had only stolen his voice. Without thinking, I raised my rifle and fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the silence of the forest, and the creature recoiled, its body jerking backward as the bullet struck. But it didn't fall. It didn't die. Instead, it let out a low, guttural growl like the sound of a wounded animal and began to move again, faster this time, its body contorting in ways that no living creature should be able to. I ran. I don't know how long I ran, but I didn't stop until I reached my truck, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it, but the fear didn't leave. I could still feel its eyes on me, could still hear my grandfather's voice echoing in my mind. For days I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that creature, that skinwalker, watching me from the edge of the trees. I could still hear its voice, still feel the pull of its unnatural presence, and the fear that I had made a mistake by venturing into that cursed place clung to me like a second skin. I went to Wally Brown, an old Navajo medicine man who had lived in the area for years, seeking answers. Wally had always been the one to speak of skinwalkers with a kind of reverence, as though he understood the depth of the curse they carried. When I told him what had happened, he didn't look surprised. Instead, he nodded solemnly as though he had been expecting it. Skinwalkers are not just stories, he told me. They are the result of dark rituals, of people who have turned their back on humanity in exchange for power. They can take any shape, any form, and they are always hungry, always watching. Wally's words haunted me, and I realized then that I had seen the skinwalker in its true form, not as a deer, not as an animal, but as something far darker, something that was once human, twisted beyond recognition. I never went back into those woods, not after that day. And as the years passed, I could never shake the feeling that something was still out there, waiting for me, watching. I don't know if I'll ever understand what I saw that day, but I know this much. Some stories aren't meant to be told. Some things are better left undisturbed, and the legend of the skinwalker will remain just that, a legend. Please tell me in comments if you like this type of content. Also leave a like on this video and subscribe so that you can always hear me at night before sleep.